Hi everyone, this is William, and I'm here with Eric the 14th of Sweden, who's absolutely irrelevant to today's video, but let's consider him a special guest. So this is the Grand Duke Dmitri 1921 diary series, and Eric was made for me by a Swedish friend who lives in Switzerland. And as you know, if you've been watching these, we are currently in Copenhagen in February 1921. So again, not really a relevant connection between Sweden and Denmark. But I just happened to come across this today. He made it for me as part of a special dinner to commemorate the death of Eric the 14th, who was killed, imprisoned, and then killed by his younger brother, and he was killed by poison pea soup. So when I'm in Davos, sometimes my friend invites me on a Thursday, which is the traditional day, I guess, for pea soup in Sweden, in memory of Eric the 14th, to come to his place for pea soup. So yeah, forgive me. I was just delighted to find that little thing from a couple years ago. So today in the diary entry, we have, speaking of lunches, we have actually three social events, two important prearranged ones and one in the middle, and all of them have multiple guests whose names we will go through. Many of the names definitely, well, maybe 50-50. Maybe, I was going to say definitely a majority, but maybe 50-50 are people we've already met, so we don't have to linger on them. But we also have some new ones. Now, the date is the 13th of February, 1921. It's a Sunday in Copenhagen, of course, at the English Mission, and let's dive in. I wanted to go to church in the morning, but then it was a frightful bore, and I decided to stay home and write. I lunched with Lucia at Hasselbach's. Charles Murray didn't come. I should clarify that it was the Hasselbach who's married to Plessen. It was remarkably nice. The other people there were Marie-Louise, Ahlefeld, and Hugo Hasselbach with his wife. After lunch, we danced, and at 5 o'clock, we went to the other end of the big house for tea in Mama Plessen's apartment. It was incredibly boring there, and there were masses of people. The house is wonderful, with masses of beautiful things. Old Countess Plessen has Russian relatives, so she has a lot of things from Russia. I didn't stay long. I preferred to go to Audrey's. Thankfully, the Parrs lived just across the street. Cocktails were served, and it was very nice. The people there were Castleman, Henderson from the American Mission and his wife, and Turner, an English trade agent, with his wife. I dined here. There was a big dinner for the Russian colony arranged a la Verdi by the Marlings on my behalf. The guests were the Meyendorfs, Baksoevdin and his daughter, Seryoja Dolgoruki, Baron Schilling, the general consul, Vanderflit, the former envoy to Darmstadt and his wife, and Princess Kozlovskaya with her daughter. Her maiden name was Shubina Pazdieva, and she's the sister of the chap I knew very well in Petrograd, who died 2 years ago in Stockholm, apparently of typhus. The dinner and the party afterwards were very nice and ended late. So everything is very nice today. All three of the occasions are very nice. And yeah, that's good, although there's some boredom intermittently. Okay, so starting with, he was going to go to church. That was not Dmitri's usual habit on a Sunday, unless he went with Maria or somebody else, or if it was a special occasion. So why would he have wanted to go to church in Copenhagen? Well, there are two possibilities. One would be that He had planned to go to some church in the city that had a reputation for beautiful music. He would sometimes do that. But the other and more likely one is that he thought it was appropriate for him as a candidate for the Russian throne to go to the Russian Orthodox Church in Copenhagen. And yeah, Orthodoxy was, in Dmitri's own thinking, an extremely important part of what he hoped would be Russia's revival. And so, he should have gone, right? And made an appearance at least, even though he wouldn't have taken communion. He wouldn't have participated in the Eucharist. But he says, it was a frightful bore, and I decided to stay home. So frightful bore, yeah, if any of you are Americans, we don't usually use the word that way, the word bore, but in England, my friends in England definitely do. Yeah, I have lots of stuff I need to get done this afternoon, and it's a real bore, or something like that. Just what he had to do in order to get up, get ready, and go to the church, all of that turned out to be just a little too much. I understand, because my Greek Orthodox Church is in Portland. I live on the north side of the Columbia River, and so I can't just get up in the morning and go a short distance and I'm at church. You have to make a drive that's not long, but longer than I like to make, and so on and so forth. Anyway, he didn't end up going to church, and, he should have. He should have. I'm not saying this on spiritual grounds, but because of what he aspired to be in relation to Russia. So we'll talk about that a little more. Okay, so the lunch is arranged by Erich Hasselbach, who's the younger brother but co-owner of this big, successful, prosperous curtain-making business, drapery-making business in Denmark. And he happens to be married to von Plessen. So we talked about the Hasselbachs and the von Plessens before, so we won't go back into that. But Lucia and Dmitri go along. Charles Marling stays at home. And yeah, since there were brothers, Dmitri clarifies that this is the younger brother's house that they're going to, although the older brother and his wife are there for the lunch. And the other people there were only two other people at lunch. One was Marie-Louise, the marriage prospect, the prospective bride, and the other one I'm a little bit confused about because I have two different names. I have Abel in my notes. One is Abelfeld, Ablefeld, and the other one is Ahlefeld, Ahlefeld. And I'm not actually sure if Abelfeld is a real name. The problem being that Dmitri was writing these names in Latin letters, and the H and the B, lowercase h and lowercase b, look very similar in Latin letters. And so I don't know who exactly we're talking about. There was a prince, a Swedish prince, or rather, no, I'm sorry, a Danish prince, Prince Erik Ahlefeld Lorfig, who was Olga's younger brother, I believe, the son of Prince Valdemar of Denmark, and he was about Dmitri's age, and it could have been him. His wife was a Canadian woman, but it also so happened that there was the British minister to Denmark was an Ahlefeld. The Belgian minister to Denmark was an Ahlefeld, and his wife was a Plessen, Countess Fritzi. So I tend to believe that this was, even though they were all connected to Denmark, I tend to believe that this was the Belgian minister and his wife, who was a Plessin. And I think Dmitri may even have mentioned that the husband was a diplomat. I can't remember. But anyway, so that's the lunch, a nice little lunch with only a few people. Dmitri knew all of them. After lunch, they dance, clearly to gramophone music, and maybe, Dmitri finally is doing some dancing with Marie-Louise, and then they go to the other end of the house. Apparently it was a huge house, to Mama Plessin's apartment. So who's Mama Plessin? Well, this was a woman of 59 named Sophia Louisa, and then Dmitri refers, my Russian colleagues add that she was Sophia Louisa Wilhelmina Augusta von Eckermann by birth, but that she was married to von Plessin, who was not Russian, but that she herself had Russian relatives. And so that was why she had all these nice Russian things that Dmitri admired. And apparently she was having a little gathering. This is a little confusing, because when they go to the other end of the house, she's having a gathering in her rooms that Dmitri tells us there are masses of people already there. So she's having some event, and Dmitri found it incredibly boring, and so he ditched. In modern American parlance, he got out of there. He went, and he not only left the gathering and left his hosts, but he left Marie-Louise. Oi, oi, oi. He went across the street to Audrey Parr's house, a woman that he clearly finds fascinating, although I don't think there's anything between them beyond just that they find each other interesting. And there's a little get-together there for the diplomatic set, let us say. Recall that Audrey's husband is actually the first or second secretary at the British mission in Denmark, and the guests there. So this is just a little cocktail party. Or rather, I don't know if you could even call it a cocktail party, but cocktails were served. Again, it's very nice. The people there were two from the American mission, Castleman, whom we know about as the naval attaché, the American naval attaché, who was, he was basically a naval intelligence officer. And he had invited Dmitri to lunch a few days before, whether it was just because he was interested in meeting a Russian Grand Duke and, God knows why, or if it was because he was sizing Dmitri up as in his capacity as a naval intelligence officer. But anyway, he's there at the cocktail party. Henderson we don't have more information about him than that he was at the American mission. Dmitri refers to him as a Sovietnik, an advisor at the American mission. I don't know if that's a diplomatic title or not. I don't know if he too was an intelligence agent, and if the lunch was interesting enough that Castleman wanted his colleague to have a look at Dmitri. But Henderson is there with his wife. And then there's this English trade agent whose name was Richard Turner, and his wife had another connection. Her name was Gertrude. Her maiden name was Stinson. And she was the younger sister of Anna Sophia Scavenius, the wife of the Danish foreign minister, who was such a beauty. So all it's like anything when you're talking about high society and or diplomatic circles or whatever. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody is connected in some way. So yeah, so there's that little gathering, and then Dmitri goes not across the street. He's gone across the street. He goes back to where he's staying, to the the British mission. Now I'm getting confused. As he calls it, the English mission. And this is a completely different event. Apparently, Marie Louise isn't there. Castleman, Henderson, Turner et al., the Plessons, none of these people are invited to this event because it's for the Russian colony. It's been arranged by Lucia and Sir Charles on Dimitri's behalf. So I think Dmitri was kind of the host. The Marlings were the host, but this was for Dmitri to entertain or to repay the members of the Russian community, like the Meyendorfs and the Buxhoevdens, who had hosted him. So, he was hosting an event. He'd been treated by them, and now he was treating them. And again, going back to the thing in the church, it was important for him to do these things as a prospective future ruler of Russia. And if the Marlings were the ones who had suggested it, then they were quite right in doing so. So we've met the Meyendorfs, we've met the Buxhoevdens, we've met Seryoja Dolgoruki. It's interesting, isn't it, that of these guests whom he mentions, there were probably others, that so many of them didn't have Russian surnames. But that's very typical because the higher-up civil servants and even a fair percentage of the nobility in Imperial Russia were people from, were Swedish Finns or were from the Baltic states, were Baltic Germans. But so, yeah, Meyendorf, Buxhoevden, I'm not sure what that nationality is. Schilling, Vanderfleet. Okay, so Baron Schilling, the general consul or the consul general, I'm not sure it's which way it goes. I don't know anything about him. It was a noble family that was in Russia. His name was Baron Ernst Schilling. I don't know which one he used, probably Ernst. And his brother was in the Horse Guards in Dmitri's regiment, although Dmitri doesn't mention the brother. Anyway, he's there. And Vanderfleet, the Russian connection there is not clear, except that he was the former envoy to Darmstadt. And since there were Darmstadt princesses, Alexandra Fyodorovna was from Hesse-Darmstadt. I'm not clear. Now they say they say Hessen und bei Rhein. And so I'm not clear on the geography. I didn't look it up. I should have, but maybe Vanderfleet's sounds Dutch, was now the envoy to Copenhagen, but had previously been an envoy to Darmstadt, and so he knew some of the Romanov Grand Duchesses, wives of the Grand Dukes, the Empress, I don't know. Anyway, finally, we have the Shubin-Pozdyev family. So the first is Princess Kozlovskaya, who was born Shubin-Pozdyev, or Shubina Pozdyeva, since she was a woman. So she was a woman in her 50s. Dmitri is always referring to these people as old. He refers to Mama Plessin as old, and she's 59, and I'm 58. So, he wasn't that young after all. He was about to turn 30. But anyway, and why did he call her Mama Plessin, by the way? Did he know her that well, or was that just how she was introduced to him? Anyway, so Elizaveta Dmitrievna, Princess Kozlovskaya, born Shubina Pozdieva, she was in her 50s. Her daughter was a little younger than Dmitri, Princess Olga Vladimirovna Kozlovskaya, not apparently of any particular interest to Dmitri. What does interest him is that the elder of the two women, the elder Princess Kozlovskaya, was the sister of someone whom he tells us he knew well. And that person was Prince Nikolai Dmitrievich Shubin Pozdiev. So I had to take a look at him and see, well, he was also in his 50s. He was older than his sister, and as we know from Dmitri, he had passed away already. So, but while they were back in Russia before the revolution, why had Dmitri known this man well? He wasn't a Flegel adjutant or anything like that. He was, he was he was 30 years, almost 30 years older than Dmitri. So why did they know each other? Well, it turns out that he was a horse breeder for the Russian government, for the state, probably to make sure that the cavalry had horses. And Dmitri was basically a horse trainer in his regiment and definitely a horse person. So they would have known each other through that. And he's rather, if you look at him up online and you see a picture of Nikolai, he's a bit silly looking. He's got one of these high maintenance fancy mustaches, but he seems like an admirable person, a person whom I would have liked to know, because he was involved in nowadays you would say nonprofit activities or charitable activities in support of the protection of animals and in support of public schools for ordinary people, just the ordinary folk. So I will give credit to Dmitri for knowing this man well, even though it was probably through the horse breeding rather than the other things. So we only have one more of these, and it's a short one, and it does not have the name list. Finally, Dmitri kind of gets a day off from all this socializing. And so then we're diving right into what I've already mentioned is this very, very interesting and psychologically intimate long diary entry. So that will be very interesting, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.